everybody, what's up? I'm Bianca.
And I'm Kiara.
We're the Dambrosiotwins. Welcome back to Next Chapter with B&C. Today, we have a very special guest, the New York Times #1 best-selling author of the Red Queen series, Victoria Aveyard, is coming on today!
So today we're here with Victoria Aveyard, who is the author of Red Queen. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today, Victoria.
Thank you guys so much for wanting to talk with me. It's always nice to talk about Red Queen because the series has ended, but it keeps finding new readers, which is really fun to experience.
Yeah, no, we loved it, and we wanted to talk with you about it because we had some questions about how did you come up with Red Queen? That's my first question.
I'm a really visual writer. And I know one of you is going to the place where I had the first inkling of this story. So I was a senior at USC in the screenwriting program, and I remember I was a student worker, and I was in the student worker office where I used to print off all my scripts for free. And I emailed myself this story idea that I had, and it was of a girl in an arena who was about to be executed, and I didn't know anything about why she was going to be executed, about what she was doing there. But I just knew that instead of being killed, she electrocutes her executioner. And I wrote that image down in my head. And from that, I started asking myself all these questions, like, who is she? What has she done wrong? What kind of world does she exist in? And I knew immediately I was thinking more in the strain of writing it as a YA novel, because writing it as a screenplay didn't have a lot of viability, especially when you're writing something really expensive and really expansive. One of my professors, one of the first things he said to us is, unless you're writing a small comedy or some sort of IP, write the book first. And he was kind of joking, and then I went ahead and did that. But it was really cool because, as you're going to learn, the bones of storytelling are the same, in my opinion, from screenwriting to prose writing. It's just the format that differs. So my education was really, really helpful in helping me figure out how to tell a story to an audience. And then script format is just different. Mm-hmm. So the beginning of Red Queen was that scene, and then from there I started building it out, and a lot of different inspirations went into it. I like to say that Red Queen is Game of Thrones meets Hunger Games meets X-Men. And sometimes I'm also like, it's a little bit of Pokemon as well.
Yeah.
I was definitely a kid who grew up with Pokemon, and that was very evident to certain people.
No, I mean, when I was reading your book, I could totally envision every scene, and I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? And you left me on the edge of my seat. So did you always want to write fantasy, or was it something that you sort of learned that you loved?
Yeah, I've loved fantasy since I was, able to comprehend what that meant and what that was, since I sort of was introduced to storytelling. And I kind of got into it in a way that makes sense once you read my books. You're like, I see how that's how she started writing. But I was a kid, like 7 or 8. I remember my brother got an N64. I'm really dating myself here. N64 had just come out, and my brother got Legend of Zelda, like the Ocarina of Time. And he would play so much that I never got a chance to play, but I would play by helping him with the guidebook and like the maps. Mm-hmm. I became really enamored of these fantasy maps, so I started drawing my own. And then the natural next question is like, well, what's happening in those maps? Who are the people who live here? And that's where I started writing stories of my own. So from the very beginning, they were these fantastical, like, princess stories that I would write 3 pages of and never come back to. And then when I was 11, I was introduced to Lord of the Rings, and that was just like, my brain is on fire. This is something that is connecting to me in a way I didn't know was possible. This is definitely my passion and where I want to be and what I want to do. Although I don't really know how to parlay that into a job. I wrote a lot of fan fiction in middle school and high school and college, and maybe a little bit after college. I know a lot of people talk about like, oh, I took this class, or I was introduced to this book. And fan fiction for me was really, really formative because I didn't have like creative writing classes before I got to college, and then I was in like the ultimate creative writing program. But before then, my first introduction to critique and sort of peer review and figuring out who I was as a writer and what I liked in sort of a no-risk situation was fan fiction online. And I really valued that experience because it taught me who I was as a writer, what kind of stories I was gravitating towards, what I was good at, what I was bad at, and I think most importantly, made me a little bit more comfortable with other people reading my work, because I was definitely the kid who would like write my stories and a parent would be over my shoulder and I'd be like, what are you doing? Don't look. Who wouldn't let people read my stuff because it felt so personal and embarrassing. And I think a lot of young writers go through that, where you're like, I don't know how to let someone read this.
Mm-hmm.
And fan fiction, you know, writing anonymously online in an established world was a really good way to get your feet wet and prepare me for going to college to study screenwriting in a workshop style program where you are always being read by the people around you and you have to get over that like sensitivity very, very quickly.
Yeah. Kiara, you gotta start writing fan fiction, I guess, before you go to school.
I know.
You gotta start. No, I totally relate to that. I'm always like, oh my gosh, who's looking over my shoulder? And then recently I've let my parents read and my sister read what I'm writing. So I'm definitely have to like build a thick skin before I go, for sure. How do you come up with fantasy titles or names to maps? And like, I'm just like, how do you come up with these names?
The real challenge is balancing something that is fantastical and feels like it belongs in that world, but also doesn't feel too inaccessible to a reader. You know, I don't want to put too many apostrophes in the word. I don't want someone to look at a name and be like, nope, unless there's a reason for it, or a world building reason or something. In my new series, I have a character who has a very complicated name, and people regularly make fun of him for having this name and immediately give him a nickname, or someone pronounces it wrong on purpose and kind of pokes at it in a way that's like, yeah, this is fantastical, but there are also real things in here and sort of real characters who are like, this is weird. I think that helps an audience. It is figuring out like what are the real world touchstones that people can connect to. So you have some names that are very, very strange, but have a through line. So in Red Queen, for example, all of the Silvers have names that are Latin based or Latin related, because I based a lot of their society on Imperial Rome. So it gives it this flavor. One thing I really wanted in Red Queen with the names, and I do the same thing anytime I'm writing, you know, a certain fantasy culture or kingdom or whatever, I want the reader to become familiar with the names in a way that they can look at a name and know where they belong. They can meet a new character, and if their name is like Sam, they think, okay, that's a red. If their name is Tiberius, that's a silver. So it's just ways of getting the audience to understand the world building as quickly as possible, so you can tell more of the story and they feel more involved and sort of enveloped by what they're reading. It's all about creating that suspension of disbelief in the reader, but also that layer of belief in the world, even though they know it's a book and they know it's a fantasy story, because that's the number one thing you need your audience to like kind of believe and connect to what's happening on the page. And once you lose that, it's really, really hard to get back. So you don't want to push them too far too fast. And you want to kind of give them the tools to do it themselves without giving them too much information. You never want to overwhelm an audience.
So like, how did you come up with all the magic in this book? Because I was reading this and like, man, she must have like a brain filled with so much like, I don't know, knowledge of science and stuff. So I'm like, I don't even know. I probably wouldn't have come up with this.
Very bad science. There is no science. Actually pointed out to me, you know, oh, the power is being passed down through patrilineally through fathers. Doesn't make sense genetically, because fathers, you know, they have the Y chromosome, so their daughters wouldn't get what they're getting. And I was like, it's magic, okay? Just leave it.
It's a fantasy, let it be.
Yeah. So technically, yes, that is somewhere I should have, you know, thought a little bit harder or known a little bit more. But the big inspiration for the magic system and the supernatural, you know, abilities in Red Queen, I really thought about the world of X-Men and what that would actually look like in the real world. I tried to game out, you know, well, what if there were people with superpowers? How would that actually go? And I thought it wouldn't take very long for them to subjugate the rest of us. That's just the way human nature works, is we naturally divide and oppress and try, and like, we're territorial, we're about in groups, we're tribal. So there would always be some sort of like this group versus that group. And I don't think it would take very long for the superhumans to take over. So that was the basis of the world. You know, it's our world. We've gone through some cataclysms, superhumans have developed, and now they're in charge. So that was the basis of the world I was building. And once I knew that structure, it was really easy to kind of layer on top of it. Okay, so here's this kingdom and that kingdom, and they have this king who has this superpower, and it's super powerful because this other family is this, and they're powerful because. So I got sort of that like dynastic Game of Thrones situation in there that I really love and connect to, and just kind of kitchen sinked it, threw in a lot of stuff that I loved and kind of tried to make it my own while also combining it in a way that felt believable.
Do you have a favorite scene that you wrote in this book? Because there's so many amazing scenes in this book. I'm just trying to think, like, what was your favorite to write for?
Definitely the twist.
Oh,
I was thinking about I knew that was there from the very beginning. That was in my original outline. And I wouldn't let myself rush ahead to write that scene. I have to write chronologically. And especially when writing that first book, when there was no guarantee of anything, I had no idea if anyone was going to read it. I knew I needed to keep that scene as motivation for me to get through the story. But I was, you know, as I was writing it, hoping, you know, oh, if someone reads this one day, I'm really excited for them to read this scene and get very mad at me, and I hope it works.
Yeah, it definitely worked. It was that one line I was like, oh God, oh no.
Cool hearing from different readers who, some of them would say, oh, I saw it coming a mile away. And some people very much did not see it coming. And that's always a fun experience. Yeah, because reading is subjective too. So people are always going to take your books in different ways. Someone's going to love it, someone's going to hate it, someone's going to think this thing was cool and this thing was cool. And it's, you know, envelops the whole process and experience of writing and reading, because that's why we do this. I write these stories to connect with other people, so it's fun to hear them connect with me.
Yeah, because I was a huge Maven and Mare fan, and so when I read that scene, I was like, oh no. I was like, no. Chapter 26. I remember chapter 26. I won't forget chapter 26. No, I won't.
It's been really fun because on TikTok, there have been people who have been posting themselves reading that chapter. And I'm like, this is why I did this. I want to see the pain in your eyes.
Yeah, it was painful. It was pretty bad. I remember I was on a vacation, a work trip. And so I was on my alone time and I was just reading and also I was like, oh no. It's like, no, you're not kidding me. I was like, no. What was the most difficult and easiest part of writing this book?
So because that book was the first book I wrote, and that was written without a contract, without any kind of assumption of success, you know, obviously you hope it happens, you dream that it happens. I remember the middle of that book was when I slowed down and kind of stopped and thought, I don't think this is going anywhere. I don't think this will get me. I didn't really understand the process either, so I wasn't even sure what I wanted. But it was just, you know, you get to that disheartening point where you think this is useless and worthless. And especially because I had just graduated college and moved home from Los Angeles to Massachusetts. I was living with my parents. I was like, did I do the wrong thing? Have I put all my eggs in the wrong basket? And luckily, both my dad and my best friend were reading the draft as I was writing. They were reading chapters as I finished. And I slowed down so much that they were like, hey, are you going to still be writing this? Because if you're not, I want to know what happened. So can you just tell me? And it was a little bit like, fine, I'll write the rest of the book for you. And a little bit of my back is against the wall. And if I stop writing now, I will absolutely never know if it was going to be successful. So I thrive well under pressure, as difficult as that was. That's why I work really well with deadlines and structure, because as a creative, I need a bit of a whip cracked over my head, or else I'm going to be on the moon for a little while. Yeah, so the middle of that book was hard. And I remember I reread Catching Fire, the second Hunger Games book, as sort of motivation and to sort of remember what I was doing and why and how much I loved what I was doing. And that was helpful. And then the second half came. And probably the easiest part, my third acts are usually quite easy to me because I structure my stories in a way that the third act is a lot of momentum and a lot of movement and probably like one or two big set piece moments. So by the time I get to the third act, all the pieces have been put into place and now they're all just falling, and it's just me kind of like holding on to a wild horse and trying to direct it in the right way. So the third acts for me usually are quite easy, and they go faster than the rest of the books.
What was the hardest Red Queen book to write?
Glass Sword. So the second book, and that was probably my weakest of the four too. And that was entirely figuring out that once you have a book published, an entire other part of the job starts. And you think your job is just to write the book, and it's not. And I still have it quite easy because I work in traditional publishing, so I have a big publishing house behind me, and I was a lead title. So I got a ton of support and a ton of play and work. But you're also, doing promo and publicity. Social media is huge. You're doing a lot of blog posts, a lot of admin that isn't just the writing. So that was difficult, and I had to kind of figure out how to balance my time doing that and writing another book at the same time. And I was on the book a year schedule, which if you're, works for a lot of authors, sometimes it's not really conducive to the creative process. You have to balance that out. But now I've done a lot more to figure out what I need to be able to do my full job properly. But Glass Sword was where I hit the learning curve really, really hard.
If there's 3 words that you can use to describe this book, what would it be?
Twists. Yeah, well, I think I would be betrayal more than twists. Betrayal, power, and this is not one word, but choosing yourself.
Okay, I like that. Who was your favorite and least favorite character to write for?
Depends on how I'm feeling out during what day. But so Red Queen is entirely from Mare's POV. So obviously writing her connected to me most, and she was the easiest for me to tell this part of the story from. Later on in the series, we start branching out to other POVs. But for Red Queen specifically, definitely easiest was Mare. I heard her voice very, very clearly. I also really love writing Maven scenes because there's so much going on with him, and so many different motivations and pieces of his personality that I had to be aware of as a writer. So that was really difficult and made me work really hard, but I feel like that made me better as a writer. So I really enjoyed that challenge. And Evangeline, I love writing Evangeline.
Yeah, she was crazy. Yeah, I was like, oh gosh, what's she gonna do now?
Her character arc over the series is probably my favorite character arc.
I know that this book is being turned into a TV show, so can you give us any hints towards what's happening, what's going on, as much as you can say?
Yes, and I know you guys know the business and you know the deal, and that there's a lot of things you can't say until suddenly you can say them, and it's a lot of hurry up and wait, and then suddenly go, go, go. We're kind of in the go, go, go phase. That's what I can say, and I'm really excited about where we are now, and the wheels are still turning, and the fact that people are still so involved with this story and dedicated to it, and we've had the same team this whole time, very much wanting to get this to the screen and get it made in the best way possible. I am really happy that we transitioned over to working on it as a series, and I worked on the first iteration of the pilot, and that was really fun to get the screenwriting muscle going again. But also I'm really excited because I feel like there's room for improvement with the original story, and I see the adaptation as kind of a chance to expand things and improve them and make them a little bit sharper and expand the story a little bit more. One of the things we're doing is bringing in some other point of views for that first book, and I'm glad we get to do that.
Ooh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. So do you have any advice for young writers, or for me, I'm going to USC as a screenwriting student.
Yeah.
So any advice for any writers out there?
I definitely my advice that I always give, some of it is actually USC advice. But one thing I learned at USC that was really, really valuable to me is the power of momentum and not letting yourself slow down to edit or to try and get a scene perfect on that first draft. You know, it's far more useful to have a finished first draft that you can then go fix than to have a perfect first 10 pages. And I think a lot of writers get bogged down with that perfect first 10 pages or first chapter or whatever. And it's really easy to tweak and tweak and tweak forever. But at some point you're like, no, you just have to keep going. So that's a really valuable lesson I learned there. And then just in general, I would say, figure out what you want to write. Don't be influenced by what you think the market wants, especially in traditional publishing, because a lot of people are like, oh, vampires are hot right now, so I'm going to write a vampire book. It's like, well, your book's not going to come out for at least 2 years and you're not going to catch the trend. So don't even try. Write something you connect to and you care about, because it's going to read on the page if you don't. Also figure out your weaknesses. I think that's really valuable to know what you're not so good at when you're writing or when you're any kind of creative, so that you can work around them and figure out what corners you want to cut. I know where I'm weaker and where I need to work harder, but I can also set up the story in a way that allows me to mitigate that factor a little bit.
That's some really good advice. Thank you so much. I want to play a this or that game really quick. Would you rather have a friend who loses your books or one who dog ears them?
Oh, dog ears. I dog ear my books.
Would you rather read only one book a year or remember everything, or read 100 books and remember nothing?
I guess I you know what, 100 books and remember nothing, because then I could reread, because there are some books where I think, oh my God, if I could read this again for the first time, that would be wonderful.
That's actually a really good answer. Would you rather be stuck on a very long plane ride or train ride without a book?
I guess plane, because usually there's some other thing you can do. But trains usually have Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's in the audiobook. There you go, there you go. Would you rather read only series or standalone novels?
Series. I'm greedy. So I do think my next book project after Realmbreaker will be a standalone, as much as I say I'm greedy and I only write series, but we'll see.
Would you rather read a book with an annoying cliffhanger or one where your favorite character is killed off?
Oh, annoying cliffhanger. I write so many annoying cliffhangers.
Would you rather wait 5 years for the final installment in a series, or get it now but must read every spoiler before you can start reading it?
Oh, 5 years. Do not spoil. Oh my God, if someone were to spoil, well, I guess Game of Thrones is kind of spoiled, but I'm still waiting for that book. I am holding out for that one.
It's been how many years? Like, it's been a long time. It's been a really long time.
10. I was 21 waiting in line for Dance with Dragons, so it'll be 11 years this summer.
Oh.
I spent my 21st birthday in line at the Barnes & Noble at the Grove. That was the first book signing I ever went to, was George R.R. Martin there. And then the second one was my own. And his are very different from mine. It was like assembly line. You just kind of slid in front of him and he signed and you went away, and there was no talking whatsoever.
I mean, I go to Barnes & Noble on my birthdays and I absolutely love it. So I totally get it.
Great.
Last question. Would you rather lose the ability to read any new books or the ability to reread books you've already read?
I would rather lose the ability to reread books, because I don't reread that often. There are very few books I will reread. I reread like Lord of the Rings, and that's about it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today. It was so much fun talking with you. And if you guys have not read Red Queen, what are you doing? Go pick up the series. It's good. And yes, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you guys for having me. This was lovely, and good luck at college. I know you're going to USC. That's so exciting. Congratulations. Obviously, super biased. I know you're going to Berkeley as well.
Yes.
Also, amazing school. Fantastic. Team California all the way.
Yeah. So much. Have a good day. Bye. Bye, Non.